growing up, taught pretty much told that tattoos was just no, this is sin. And there was a couple other subjects, a couple other topics that's kind of the same way, to where I was just taught, to sin. As I grew up with these different topics, I started seeing different Christian leaders and just different leaders that I really looked up to and respected, and they would start doing those things like getting tattoos and junk, and I was like, wait a second, I was told that was a sin. So it was like, I'm going to start researching it, I'm going to start looking it up and just figure out what the Bible really says about it. There's a couple verses that people bring up, and I'm going to try and walk through them, just kind of go through and show you why I believe that tattoos aren't a sin. But there was a video I found by Lecrae Moore. He's a hip-hop artist who is faithfully representing God through music and art. And he has a video, actually, it's still on YouTube, to where he's teaching about tattoos, and in fact, everything that I've researched in tattoos has backed up what he has said. And so, as you're watching this, if you go back and watch him, it's going to sound like I'm quoting him. And I pretty much am, because I agree with him. We're on the same page. So the first verse I want to go over is, passage of verses is in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, starting in verse 12 down to verse 20. And there's a couple things I want to go into here, because there was a bit of misunderstanding on Facebook about how I was trying to convey what I thought this verse meant. The first thing, it starts out, and Paul says, all things are permissible or lawful for me, but not all things are beneficial. There's two different places, 1 Corinthians, that he talks about all things being permissible. One is in chapter 10, one is in chapter 6. I'm going to cover both of them as I go in before I move on to Old Testament, talk about tattoos. In 1 Corinthians 6, he's saying all things are permissible, but he tells us, as soon as he says that, I will not let anything become a master over me. None of my freedoms will have mastery over me. Now, first we need context. What he means all things are lawful. There was a couple things in the law that the Jews were not allowed to do because the law had stated you cannot do this. But because Christ came and he was the fulfillment of the law and he completed it, making it to where Jesus upheld the law perfectly. And he was so perfect in upholding it that we don't have to worry about upholding it. And because of that, there's different aspects of the Old Testament law that we don't have to follow. For example, is Acts 19. Peter is on a rooftop and he has a vision of animals coming down the canvas, and God tells him, kill these things and eat it. Well, according to Old Testament law, that was a sin. You can't eat those animals, pork and reptiles. You can't eat those according to Old Testament law. But because of Jesus, the law was fulfilled and those things were made clean. And so now we can have pork and stuff. And so that's one example of how Old Testament laws were fulfilled through Christ. And so things are a bit different contextually and culturally. And just background. So when he's saying all things are permissible for me, he's not really necessarily saying, listen, I can go on and I can sin all I want. Because Romans chapter 6 would dethrone that immediately. So, that we have to be careful in saying that all things are permissible. And that's where I was misunderstood, is that they're pretty much saying, oh, you can do whatever you want. No. It means that the law's been fulfilled and I have freedoms that according to the Old Testament I didn't have before. Now I have freedoms. But I will not allow my freedoms to gain control over me. So, in context, pork. Pork is one thing. Now, if I'm saying, man, I'm going to eat pork, that doesn't mean that I become, I don't let pork become master me to where I get like addicted to it, or it starts messing with my cholesterol and I become extremely unhealthy and stuff like that. I will not let it become master over me. I will not let it take over me. And that's one thing. You do not let your thing become mastery. Then it goes on, the verse where in chapter 6, to where a lot of people say, oh, this is why you can't get a tattoo. It starts talking about how our bodies are temples. And people are like, okay, your body's a temple. You should treat it like one, don't get tattoos. True. Sort of. Look in the context, okay? Something I've been learning is you gotta look in context. You say, okay, your body's a temple, that is very true. But one thing we gotta realize, that if you're gonna say that I cannot get a tattoo because my body's a temple, you need to quit eating McDonald's, because McDonald's is the worst thing on the earth that you could possibly do to your body. It's terrible. If your body's a temple, you better be as athletic as an Olympian. It's a temple. It better be at peak. Both of those are out of context. I still eat McDonald's. But in the context of it, Paul is saying, listen, there was a lot of sexual immorality happening in the church of Corinth. A lot of bad stuff. And so he's saying, listen, when you have sex with someone, those two bodies, the two souls, become one. God makes them one. He joins them together. And so because of that, you need to realize your body is a temple of God. And so when you have sex with a prostitute, because that was a huge problem, was prostitution in worship back then, especially in Corinth, in the temples, prostitution worship in the temples to their gods. He's saying, listen, when you have sex with a prostitute, that prostitute becomes one with the temple of God. So a prostitute who is there so that you can worship a false god should not become one with the temple of God. Sin should not be made one with things of God. And so that's what he's saying. Your body's a temple. Live like it. And so it's in the realm of sexually related things when he says that your body's a temple and that you need to guard yourself. Pretty much you need to keep your body pure. And that is absolutely true. Then the second passage to where it talks about all things are permissible is once again in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And he sits there and he's talking about how because all things are permissible, he can eat whatever he wants. And there was an issue of people. He's pretty much saying I can do whatever he wants. And in the pagan temples, they would sacrifice meat, and then they would take the meat to the marketplace and they would sell it. And some people, they just didn't feel right. They're like, man, that's sacrificed to false gods. You shouldn't eat it, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And Paul goes, listen, I've been made free in Christ, and because I'm free, I have no problem eating that meat, because to me, it's a false god. It's not even real anyway. So I don't even care. It's meat. I'm going to thank God for his provision. I'm going to thank him for creating the meat. I'm going to thank him for, everything God had to do with getting this food in front of me, and I'm going to eat it with joy. Then he says that not all things are beneficial, and he goes into that too, is if he's eating this meat, and someone at the dinner table looks at him and says, hey, Paul, you do know that was sacrificed to idols. He says, I'm going to push it away from me. I'm not going to eat it. And he says, here's the reason. He says, I refuse to eat it, not because I feel guilty, because he says, I don't feel guilty. I know what I believe, and I don't have a problem with it. I do it so that they won't look at me and they won't stumble. I do it so that when they look at me, they'll be like, okay, he's following God, because they obviously feel convicted about it if they bring it up to me. And so that's it. And that is one struggle I have with tattoos. There's a lot of people who, especially me wanting to go into ministry, is they don't view tattoos well. And so, if they look at me, oh my goodness, John Mark has a tattoo. And obviously this is something I need to address because some people think that tattoos are wrong. And so there's obviously still some people out there. And so that is something I'm struggling with, is considering the younger brother, so to speak, and how to follow this pursuit and desire to get a tattoo while still honoring the younger brother. And I'm hoping this video will help with that, to open the eyes of anyone out there questioning. And so those, in the context when I said all things are permissible, all things are lawful on Facebook, what I was saying is because of Christ, I've been given freedom and the law has been fulfilled, and there's some things the law said not to do that I am now allowed to do. Now, I'm not saying that the entire law is destroyed. Jesus said that. He said, I did not come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill it, and therefore we've been given freedoms. Now in the Old Testament, Leviticus 19:28 says, do not cut yourself, do not make marks on your body for the dead. I am the Lord. There's a couple things we got to do, and we got to take it in context. Because if you want to take it and just say, all right, it says don't mark yourself, don't cut yourself, don't have tattoos, I'm the Lord. You want to take it like that, then you need to take the first verses in front of it, which says, the first two, 26 and 27. 26 says, eat no meat with blood in it. So if you've ever had a rare steak, you're a sinner. And then 27 says, don't cut your hair or your beard a certain way. So if you ever had a haircut, you're a sinner. And obviously that's not the case. We've got to look in context of verse 28 where it says, do not mark yourself or tattoo yourself for the dead. So contextualize this with the culture. The pagan religions would worship their different gods by cutting themselves. An example of that is in 1 Kings 18, I believe, and it's when Elijah is mocking the priest of Baal and saying, hey, maybe your God's asleep. And so they all take knives and daggers and they start hitting their arms and slashing their arms till it was flowing blood just to get attention from God. I want to let you guys know, as far as tattoos go, it's not to get attention from God. I am a child of God. I don't need his attention. I've already got it. Not because of anything I've done. There's nothing I can do to get his attention. He already loves me. I've got it. So that's not the purpose of the tattoo. Another thing they did, which is directly addressed in the verse, is if someone in their family or a friend of theirs died, as a remembrance of that family member, they would cut themselves and they would put themselves in pain and a tattoo as a way to mourn for the dead. And pretty much what God is saying is this. He's saying, listen, don't cut yourself for worship of false gods, and don't mark yourself don't mark your body, a memorial on your body for someone who's dead. I am the Lord. Just the way that I understand it, and to the best of my ability in research and study, is when he says I am the Lord and tags that on with it, he's saying, listen, those are false gods. They're not the real God. They do not deserve your worship at all, period. Forget the cutting. They don't deserve your worship. And he's saying, listen, I don't want you to bleed yourself out for me. Don't bleed out. Because they were, like it says, they were cutting themselves until blood flowed. And I mean, in 1 Kings. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's disgusting. I literally cringed. And he's saying, they're false. Don't do that. And for the dead, they're dead. Don't mark yourself as a memorial. I am the Lord, is what he says. I am the covenant God. I am Yahweh. And he's saying, don't do that. I am God. I alone am worthy. And so, for me, what I've studied, there's a lot of other verses. You have a verse that says, I don't remember if it's in Numbers or Leviticus, it says that priests are not to mark themselves, they're not to have tattoos on their bodies, they're to be pure. And so a lot of people will say, well, John Mark, God made us a holy priesthood. Yes, but we have to take Hebrews where it says that Christ was our priest. See, the job of the priest in the Old Testament was to be a mediator between God and man, and that's why they had to be pure. They had to be a mediator that was pure. And Hebrews 10 talks about God being, Jesus coming as our perfect mediator and our perfect priest, and he was perfect for me. I don't have to be perfect anymore. I fail, and because of that, I still have a relationship with God because there's a mediator who is Christ, and he was pure, he was perfect, far more than those priests will ever be. But you also have to look in context. There's a lot of things in there that were changed in that same chapter. It's talking about priests were not allowed to marry women who were once prostitutes. Well, does that mean, let's say I were to get older and there's this girl that I meet, and let's say she was once, whether forcibly or just to survive, she was a prostitute. Does that mean that no Christian could marry her? No, because we've been redeemed and we've been made new. And so I think that's something that's got to be taken contextually, and you've also got to realize that we've been redeemed. You also have to realize that Hebrews 10:1 talks about the law being a shadow of the good things to come. The things of the law, the perfection, the holiness, and the unity of it all isn't, oh my goodness, it's for one to show us, it's not to say, oh man, I can't do this. Well, actually, yeah, it is actually. It's to show us how much we need Christ. That's what the law is supposed to be. But also, it's a foreshadow of when Christ comes back and to bring restoration to all of the kingdom, all of creation, and to bring his kingdom, the new heaven, the new earth. It is a picture of complete holiness. The law is what heaven will be, and it'll be perfect. And so, by that, what I believe, just through study, this may not make any sense. I may be rambling and none of you understand anything I'm saying. But according to that, I believe that tattoos are sinful if they're in worship of anything other than God. If I tattoo myself with something as a mark to remember anything other than God, that is sinful. If it does not point to God, it's sinful. Which, in fact, I think anything at all on this planet Earth, if it doesn't point to God somehow, then it's sinful. There's an absence of God, then it's sin. So, but I believe if tattoos are pointing to God and they are reflecting God, glorifying God, they are not sinful.